Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the Be Ready for the World conference. I'm Florence from Cambridge University Press and I'll be hosting your webinar today. I'm delighted to be joined today by Christine Chen, who will take you through this session on developing your learners' writing skills. Christine is an established primary education advisor and author, specialising in English and curriculum development. Before we start, I just wanted to go through a few points with you. You might have noticed that your microphones are muted. They will stay on mute as we go through the session, just to avoid any background noise. Christine and I are both hosting this webinar from home, so if there are any issues with our connection, please just bear with us. I'm sure you'll all understand. There will be a Q&A at the end of this webinar, so do post any questions for Christine in the Q&A box. You can also use the chat box for any general comments, but please don't post your questions in there as they might get lost. So questions in the Q&A box, please. If you're having any technical difficulties with sound or video, let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to resolve them for you. We recommend that you use headphones to listen to the session for the best sound quality. We are also recording the session, so we'll send you a link following the conference so you don't miss anything. If you're unable to see the Q&A or chat icons, please hover your mouse at the bottom of the screen and they should appear. But now, over to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Florence. Thank you, Team Cambridge. I'm really delighted to be here today. This is the biggest audience that I've ever had to speak to, so I feel privileged to be doing this, and I hope you've had a good day so far and that you're very, very well. So today we're looking at how we can support our children, the children in our schools, to become the very best writers possible. For them to become real writers who feel confident about writing, who feel passionate about it, and who write with purpose. So this is what we're going to be looking at. This is the session overview. And as you can see, there's a lot here. And we will keep coming back to this overview. I'm going to make sure that I focus on bridging that journey from reading into writing, which is so crucial for the development of writing. And I'm going to really focus on developing fluency throughout this as well. So this is what we know about the best writers in our schools, that they have developed a love of language. And this is because they've been exposed to the highest quality language models from a very early age. So they've been listening to and joining in with nursery rhymes, with stories. They've listened to a lot of fantastic language to the point that they've actually kind of got a library in their heads. They've got a head full of language models. And so it's really important that when we're thinking about developing children as writers, that we give them this experience, that we build in plenty of time for the children to be listening to and engaging with and enjoying fantastic high quality language. And this includes non-fiction, because obviously, even if you're an avid reader for children, they tend to have less exposure to non-fiction in terms of what they listen to. So including non-fiction with all of this. So if we want children to become successful writers, they have to really become competent in each of these 4 areas. So that ideas generation is the driver, isn't it? And making sure that they can organize the ideas well. And obviously, being really aware of what sentences do, understanding how they work, and as part of that it's vocabulary and punctuation, of course, which that's all sentence structure. And for a lot of children, it's going to be spelling and handwriting that they can find to be real issues. And there's a lot of discipline in these, isn't there? But it's important that fluency happens here. And it's a big job, isn't it, for children to become successful in writing. But we'll have a look at how we can take them through to the best of our abilities. So this is what it feels like for a lot of children, that writing is such a tricky task, isn't it? It's huge. And so it can actually feel like juggling whilst unicycling on a tightrope, and then doing all of this simultaneously and for an audience. It's tricky. So how do we help them? You've probably had children in your classrooms, in your schools, saying this out aloud: I don't know what to write about. And even when they do know what to write about, some children would just say, I just don't know how to write it. And there'll be some children in our classes who are thinking these things, but they won't be telling us. But we can usually tell who those children are. So it is a really useful thing, a worthwhile thing to think about where great ideas come from, because ideas drive writing. And so hopefully the ideas are coming out of wonderful texts we're sharing with children, ideas that come out of those. Really important to find out what issues matter to children, because by thinking about those things, what they're fascinated about, they're much more likely to be motivated. And obviously cross-curricular learning, because by having a drawing content from cross-curricular learning, children will have just more to write about. They'll have that content and they'll be knowledgeable about it. And obviously, and I'm sure that you do this, just sharing really fantastic visual stimulus, audio visuals as well, and artifacts, because these things bring language to life. And we know that the best ideas don't necessarily come when we're sitting at our desks and by ourselves. In fact, the research does show this, doesn't it? If you've ever come across Professor Barbara Oakley, so Professor Barbara Oakley, you'll know that actually ideas can come when we're in a diffuse mode. So that's when we're, actually a little bit relaxed, when we're in drama, we're in role play, we're in play, we're in exploration. So in those modes, that's when children feel really fired up and freed up in their ideas generation. And and this, you can see how important I feel that this is dialogue. Isn't it during dialogue that we have our best ideas, that we're sharing and building on thoughts? And it's here that we really kind of clarify our thinking as well. So we might say, oh, so what did you mean by that? Oh, I see. How about this? What do you think? And it's during dialogue that this collision of thought happens, and combinations of thought happens, and fresh ideas come about. And then it's about getting all of this onto paper or on screen. So in order for children to write well, they need to know what a good one sounds like. They need to know, they need to have been exposed to the highest quality texts as models for writing. So let's have a quick look at this. Because when you're writing, when anyone's writing, how do we know how to structure what we're writing? Whether it's a letter of complaint, an application, a school report, or a mystery story, any one of these things, when we come across something that we're having to write for the first time, or just something that is unfamiliar to us, we're going to go to great models, we're going to find them. And this is absolutely crucial to children, because this is where they find out, actually what a good version sounds like. This is where we draw out the success criteria. So how do we build that bridge between reading and writing? It's about scaffolding the journey for them, isn't it? So what do we mean by scaffolding for success? I'm going to illustrate what this looks like with an example in a moment, but just to take a look at these. It's about immersing children in the richest text. I can't say that enough. Making sure that they're enjoying it, actually enjoying the process, and building in comprehension there as well. Obviously, it's about generating great vocabulary, precise language, and selecting language structures with them, again, drawing on the text models. And it's about capturing and organizing ideas, showing them how this can happen, and it's going to be different for different texts. And it's about modeling and modeling composition, collaborative composition, so doing one together. So what we're talking about is the gradual release into independence. And it's about being really clear about what constitutes success, and how do children know what success is like? Well, it's all about those rich models, isn't it? So let's imagine that we are looking at, we're exploring descriptive poetry, and we're going to, as a class, write about this lovely creature, the red robin. So using a lovely, vivid visual stimulus to really draw out descriptive language from this. So we might work with them on how this robin looks, the colour of it, the shape of its body, think about how it moves, and even think about the land around it. But in order for the child and the class to write well about this lovely red robin, they actually have to have explored a fantastic model text beforehand. And that fantastic model text could actually be about something slightly different, or actually quite different here. So here we would again share a visual stimulus and just look at this, and we'd get the children to notice those, look at it, the fragile wings, the vibrant colour, the unusual shape of the body, and we'd get them to notice how it's sat. Look at it sitting on the hand there. And so having done that, we would then share that fabulous model text. And I love this poem, The Dragonfly. So just join in with me, just read with me, because it's a lovely poem. When the heat of the summer made drowsy the land, a dragonfly came and sat on my hand with its blue jointed body and wings like spun glass. It lit on my fingers as though they were grass. So obviously with the children, we would explore this, and we'd use visuals to help, we'd use mime to help, especially with unfamiliar language like drowsy. So what is, thinking about drowsy, we could mime it, we could use the images, and look at that blue jointed. So there's an example of the blue jointed body there. And we might explore language like lit. So lit meaning settled in this context. So it settled on my hand. And some children won't necessarily know what spun glass looks like. So there's an example of spun glass in that bauble. So in what way are the wings like spun glass? So then we turn to our lovely robin, and we would again get the children to think about the robin, explore it in order to write. And what we would do is we would use the underlying structure of the original text in order to write about this lovely creature. So here we have the original model, and we could have that actually displayed in front of the children. That always works really well, particularly when you're composing with them. And obviously we're writing about the red robin, and we're not talking about the heat of the summer, we're talking about the chill, the cold of the winter. And you can see how the underlying structure of our new poem would be taken from the original one. And the extent of this scaffolding is going to be different depending on the children's experience of the form and of the language. So that's going to vary. So here we have the red robin, and obviously we would go through this with the children. We would compose one together. So looking at the cold, what words could we use there? What did the cold do to the land? So it's the red robin that came, and how did it get onto your hand? And with the visuals, we know what it looks like. So how would we describe it? And how did it sit on your fingers? And you can see at the end there, the final line. Sometimes I decide to give the children the final line just to kind of help them, and they can obviously choose to change that. And then obviously the vocabulary matters greatly, and this is where a text can make or break. And actually this so we would do something like this. We generate the language with the children, and you can see how I've structured it here. The cold can be how do we describe the cold, the chill, the frost? How do we describe the land? Frozen, icy, frosty, snowy, barren. How does that how does that robin move? It hops, it skips, it flits. How does it sit? It might perch, it might land, it might rest. The plump feathered body we're describing, the proud plumed velvety body, the puffed little round chest. And you can see on another example here during a different session, we've got different language coming out from the generation that we've done together. And obviously, we'll have children with very different vocabulary starting points. And if children don't give us very much, well, obviously the visuals, the audio visuals will help, but we may, for some children, and at some times actually offer some language banks, some word banks to help with this process. But you can see the structure will help, and the way that this planning is structured will help them in the final write. So now we move on to a shared write. So I call this collaborative composition. So you're kind of modeling the process, modeling what's happening inside the author's head. So you might come up with something like this. When the chill of the winter made frozen the land, a red robin hopped and perched on my hand. With its plump feathered body and crimson red chest, it paused on my fingers as though they were its nest. And just look at that change at the end there, because that's what it's about, isn't it? Different choices and thinking about the effects. And this is from a different session. When the chill of the winter made crunchy the land, a red robin darted and settled on my hand. With its plump, fluffy body and rusty red chest, it hopped on my fingers as though they were its nest. And whenever we're undertaking a collaborative composition or shared write, it's a really good idea to actually have a go yourself or with your team. Because by doing that, you can anticipate where the struggles can be. And also you can really think about how to organize the planning process and the ideas generation. So it really helps to actually have thought one through, as I have done here. And so once the children have together written the Red Robin example, so as a class using the generated ideas that have happened, it's now that the children can actually work on an independent one. And so this one, they could work on the ladybird. They could choose another creature, of course. And you can see how the underlying structure there would help, and also you can see how the visuals support as well. So they might come up with something like this. When the warmth of the summer made verdant the land, a ladybird came and flew onto my hand. With its red spotted body and shell like a dome, it crawled on my fingers as though they were its home. And so what we're talking about is the gradual release into independence. It's taking them through a good version, a great version, doing one together, and then children writing their own. So gradual release into independence. So let's take a closer look now at how we can help children to understand what sentence structures do and what the impact of their word choices. Okay, so I'm going to share this fantastic strategy. That children absolutely love this strategy, and it's all about helping children to understand how powerful word choices are. And I call this, and we call this, every word counts, and children love it. So we start with a 6-word sentence, as we have here. I leapt onto the mighty dragon. So I leapt onto the mighty dragon. Who might I be, first of all? Is this mighty dragon friendly or terrifying? Why am I leaping on it? So getting children to visualize and think about the story. Then we might take the sentence and take a dice, and it could be a real dice. I like to use a real dice. Some people prefer to have the version on screen. And we think about how we can select a word using the dice throw, and we change that word. So let's just, for example, imagine that the dice landed on, let's imagine it landed on 5. And so we'd be looking at mighty, okay? So we change the word mighty. I leapt onto the mighty dragon. Now, how could we change mighty? What could we change it to? I leapt onto, for example, the tiny dragon. I leapt onto the ferocious dragon. I leapt onto the timid dragon. So drawing out those changes with the children and noticing how with each word change, the whole story changes altogether. Complete difference between the mighty and timid, isn't there? Or let's imagine that the dice had landed on 2. It landed on leapt, so 2. So how could we change leapt? We could say, for example, I tumbled onto the mighty dragon, and that would be an entirely different story, wouldn't it? I slumped onto the mighty dragon. I'm wondering what's gone on there. Or I somersaulted onto the mighty dragon. Totally different, adventurous story happening. So with each word choice, the story changes altogether. And even with the onto, if the dice landed on a 3, if we just changed it to I leapt from the mighty dragon, that's a different part of the story, isn't it? It's happening at a different time. I leapt from the mighty dragon, or I leapt under the mighty dragon. Why would you be doing that? I leapt over the mighty dragon, and suddenly it's again, there's a lot more adventure going on there. And even with a small word like the, if we changed the, I leapt onto the mighty dragon, changed to something like I leapt onto her mighty dragon, well, then we'd be asking, well, who is this she? Or I leapt onto a mighty dragon. Oh gosh, so there's more than one of them. Or I leapt onto that mighty dragon. Oh, that one, the one we all know about, or the one that is right there. So it's really teaching the children that every single word choice makes a difference to either the story or to the perspective, the detail of the story. So it's only after the children have actually had these opportunities of playing with language, generating language, seeing what each word does, that we would introduce the terminology. Because the terminology is secondary, it does label the parts, but actually the focus needs to be on what each word does, because that is what children are doing and we are doing when we're writing. It's also what we're thinking about when we're editing. What's each word going to do to the sense of this? So let's imagine that we're enjoying Jack and the Beanstalk together. Fantastic, children love Jack and the Beanstalk, don't they? And we're actually looking at joining clauses together. So joining simple sentences or clauses together. And we'd be using conjunctions to make that join. The beanstalk was huge and Jack continued to climb. Well, we know that now there's a relationship between those two. But just look at this. The beanstalk was huge, so Jack continued to climb. Now that's now telling us something slightly different, isn't it? That Jack is continuing to climb because the beanstalk was huge. Whereas if we go for but, different sense altogether again. The beanstalk was huge, but Jack continued to climb. And suddenly he's seeming like he's a very resilient character here, that he's not going to give up. So it's just really about getting children really thinking about the word choices they make and the impact on meaning. That's what's important. It isn't simply about using a variety of conjunctions, which sometimes we say. It is about the meaning of those. So you can see again here, swapped around the two simple sentences. So Jack continued to climb, but the beanstalk was huge. So, it's such a massive mammoth task, isn't it now? Jack continued to climb, for the beanstalk was huge. So again, we have that relationship with because. And so it's the emphasis on what words are doing, the meaning that they make in the sentence. And we do this using physical activity, sentence strips. Some people call them human sentences, so children standing with these bits of paper and just swapping in, swapping out and discussing meaning. But if we want children to really understand what sentence structures do, what the potentials are, we expose them to the very best models like this one, the fox and the billy goat. in the stories from Aesop. Fox was daydreaming as he trotted along. He was thinking of all the plump little hens he'd caught last night, waiting for him in his nice warm den. Just look at that. Look at the way that the author has introduced the character and what's going on inside the character's head as he's trotted along, and giving a backstory there. And all three use of the past progressive tense, so was daydreaming, alongside the simple past, trotted along. He was thinking, so again, past progressive, waiting, past progressive, and all of this creating a really good introduction to the fox. And so what we would do is just get children to notice these sentence structures and what they're doing to the story, and get them to do the same, actually, to use some of those structures in their own class writing. So let's apply this to Jack and the Beanstalk. So Jack was whistling as he strode back home. He was imagining how proud his mother would be at the sight of the magic beans he'd got in exchange for the cow, rattling about in his pocket. So just really looking at what authors do with the sentence structures they choose, and the impact on meaning. Because there's accuracy, and accuracy is important in grammar, in sentence structure, but there's also turn of phrase. And great writers have a terrific turn of phrase that just draws the reader in. It makes a story into a story. So as in this example of Rapunzel by Sarah Gibb, this is fabulous turn of phrase. Just listen to this. Suddenly they came to a clearing, and there in the middle was a tall tower with no door, just a few windows at the very top. To Rapunzel's amazement, although the tower was as slender as a tree, inside there was room after beautiful room, lit by thousands of delicate lamps which glowed as bright as day. And there in the middle, there was room after beautiful room. And so we would get children to notice these structures, these turns of phrase, and we'd have them really think about them and apply them to their class story. So you can see here how similar structures have been used. Eventually, he came to an opening, and there in the clouds was a castle with an enormous door. To Jack's astonishment, although the castle was vast and uninviting, inside there was room after magical room. Now listen to that, filled with treasures beyond his wildest dreams, which glowed like candle flames. So it's really about getting children to notice and to hear plenty of times those that turn of phrase, that wonderful turn of phrase. And we all know that there'll be a lot of children who in their spelling tests they do really well, but then they struggle when they try to apply their spellings in context as they're writing. So let's think about that relationship with writing fluency. It's worth thinking about spelling in two parts. There are high frequency words and there are fixed afterwards words. High frequency words, the words that children use a lot, sight words, common words like really and when, because, and then there are fixed afterwards words that actually we can wait, we can think about this a little bit later, and I'll come on to these. If we as writers and children as writers have to think about spelling high frequency words, we lose fluency and we lose the idea of the sentence structure, and we're unlikely to compose well. So let's think about how we deal with high frequency words. We have to prioritize them. With fixed later words, this is a great strategy. Get the children to be their own spell checker. So as they're writing, rather than thinking about correcting their spellings at the point of writing, just underline it as if they were their own spell checker, and then build in time for them to fix it later during the editing process. And obviously some children will need help with selecting which words to correct during the editing time. This is a great strategy using post-it notes for high frequency spelling errors. So just imagine that a child has been spelling when incorrectly over and over again. What we do is we write the word on a post-it note or something similar, and we stick it at the top of their book so that they can see it as they're writing. It's high frequency, so this word will come up over and over again. We give the child a target word, so they have to target number, sorry, and they have to actually write that word 20 times correctly in the context of their writing. And each time they do so, they underline that word and they tally it. So by the time they've actually written this word 20 times correctly in context, they will automatically know how to spell this word instead of learning the incorrect spelling by writing over and over again the incorrect version. So the idea is that this post-it note would travel through the book with them. And with longer words, I'm sure that you do this, we segment the words into syllables. So with crocodile, we can say crocodile, and we can say to them, well, croc, let's spell croc first of all, croc. Let's write that down first of all. Write that down. Dial, dial, write that down. Crocodile. And so it's treating each syllable as if they're a single word, sometimes nonsense words as in ick, op, and ter. And by doing this, children are much more likely to spell accurately those longer words. And it can be news to children, a surprise, that suffixes are actually set, that they are spelt the same all the time, because look at these examples. You probably have children who sometimes write the ly ending with L-E-Y, sometimes L-Y, or the full with a double L. But if they know that suffixes are actually set, they're going to be the same every time, then that really helps them. And so it helps just to display them that way in the classroom. Obviously, they would need to know that root words changed, as in beauty turning to beautiful, or hope turning to hoping, where the E has been dropped and then the ing added, and the same with ED. I call these fast fixes. So the fast fixes are the ones that are worth spending more time on. So really that taking the E and adding ing or ed, or changing a Y to an I when adding a suffix is worth doing, because there's such frequent errors that children make. But the important thing is planning for application. So children need to need to know when the spelling rules and the spelling patterns will be applied. So which of these words are we most likely to use in our writing today? Really important to ask. And when we're teaching suffixes, it's really important, and actually for other spelling rules, when are they likely to occur? Look at these suffixes, they occur a lot in story writing. And so we give children phrases that might actually occur in stories. And you can see that these ones would apply very well to our Jack story, wouldn't they? So what about handwriting? Because, obviously handwriting supports fluency. Let's think about why handwriting matters so much. Handwriting is the filter through which ideas and sentences pass. If children struggle with their handwriting, their composition suffers. So here are some quick tips. Always explain the point of handwriting. It's about getting wonderful ideas onto the page. Prioritize fluency, neatness comes later. Focus on movement, not end products, because this way the children will be able to join well and keep up that fluency. It's not just about the shape of each letter. And little and very often, it's a motor skill, so it needs to be automatic, and that's how we can practice it, little and often. This is the point. It's about freeing up the thinking, because the process of composing writing is often obstructed by the amount of effort required to get those ideas down. It's really important to focus on it. So motivating writing, let's spend a minute on this. So motivating writing, the power of purpose. And it's purpose that is going to give children motivation to write. So let's make the writing matter to them. If they're writing information text, well, let them be the experts about a topic for other children to learn from. If they're writing instructions, well, make sure the instructions are being followed by other children or other people. If they're writing persuasive letters, write them to people who will actually act on them, maybe the headmaster or the council, whatever, but make sure that those letters are actually sent. And with recounts, just get them on the school website. and put children's work in the public, in public spaces, in the lobby, in concerts, and using brochures for productions. And really importantly, and this last point is so important, actually getting children to write in order to support their speaking and listening, their presentations, as I have done with this one, and with their debates, and that raises their speaking and listening as well. But the point is that if we give the children real purpose, they're much more likely to rise to the challenge and do their very best. So this is what we've been looking at. It has been a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully you've got some ideas and strategies to adapt and think about. And I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your reflection, and good luck with this. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christine, for a wonderful presentation. And we have had so many nice comments in the chat box saying how helpful it's been.
Oh, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for that.
There's also been some great questions, and we've got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to run through as many as possible. And we'll start with one about differentiation. So, of course, everyone has mixed ability classes, and they're saying, how can we apply differentiation in the skill of writing?
Yes, that's a huge one, isn't it? And the job of every teacher. And I think one of the things to note is that the process that we've gone through today will help all abilities. And because it's so scaffolded, it's having those kind of chunks of time for different parts of the process. And I would say with more able learners, what we would tend to do is actually just give less scaffolding, because obviously in terms of the children who are writing well, they've just had that kind of fantastic language bank, haven't they? And so they won't need so much scaffolding. So scaffolding is a big part of it. And for children who are struggling, it's actually going back to those four areas of writing and thinking, which part is it that they need most work on? Is it the ideas generation? Is it the organisation? Is it the spelling? Is it the handwriting? So it's actually been quite diagnostic about it, and thinking where the emphasis needs to lie. So the process that we've been through today would be the same for all children, but it's just that you would have more emphasis on particular areas for particular children. And with things like handwriting and spelling, obviously these things they are. We need to get to the point of automaticity, don't we? So these things, they do need that extra time to practice to the point of automaticity, and it may be that it's carving out time for that. If it's vocabulary, then it's thinking about with vocabulary, it's thinking about actually giving them plenty of opportunities to hear great texts, as we're saying. For most children, it's going to be hearing that language, being exposed to that language, that where they will get better. They will be accruing that vocabulary, those sentence structures, and so on. So yeah, that's a big question, but hopefully that kind of answers it to an extent.
Thank you very much. And I think your answer actually leads on to the next question, which is about model texts. And you mentioned the value of high quality texts. So what criteria should be considered in selecting the model texts to be?
I like that question. Okay, that's a great question. Well, I think one is will the children be interested in it? Is it going to be something that they that the text needs to speak to them in some way, doesn't it? So it might be to do with what they're interested in. Obviously, would I be interested in it if I were their age, is an important question that we must always be asking. Is it well written? Does it affect us? Does it actually include the elements that we want the children to be using? Because the whole point of it is that they are being immersed in those model texts and drawing on what's there. It can be difficult to get hold of great texts, but I just love to use classics, contemporary classics as well. Always been careful about representation though. I find, there's just so many great authors out there, and it's just keeping your eyes open, talking to colleagues. Where have you found the best ones? Carnegie winners, prize winners, obviously they can they're good to look at, and it's just kind of knowing where the sources are. And I just want to say that, because I'm series editing the Cambridge English, and there's some great model texts in the Cambridge English for primary, fantastic model texts in there. So yeah, there's so I hope that answers the question, but I'm sure that it's about the quality. Just is it relevant? Do the children love it? And then does it show off the things that you want the children to be doing in their own writing?
Excellent, thank you. And now we've had lots of questions through about how you might adapt these ideas for an ESL classroom. So how to connect these ideas in a classroom where we're teaching ESL. And if you could also touch on if there's anything you might do differently in an online ESL classroom. People are asking that as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. I would actually say for English as a second language or English as an additional language, the process that we've been through today with the very clear scaffolding, that is really important, and that I'm hoping that you will feel that the children who have got an English as an additional language will benefit from the process that we've been through today. Because actually, I do actually run courses for children with English as an additional language, and this process is the same process for those children, and it's just kind of the amount of scaffolding that needs to happen. It may be likely you might need to spend more time on the vocabulary generating, and obviously we know that with if children are bilingual, if they can actually have use their first language to generate some of their ideas initially, if you have got that access, then that can be really helpful, because the home language can really help. And obviously dual language books can be helpful, and it's really important in terms of the in terms of listening to stories and listening to the language. That's the most important aspect, actually. Our children over and over again listening to that high quality language. And so we very often advocate audiobooks. So are the children accessing audiobooks? Because that's a really great way in, especially if they, separately, but also with the text in front of them. And the other thing that works really well is just actually having a lot of choral work going on. So children, you as the teacher, actually leading choral repetition of texts, so that really embeds. But obviously, with all children with English as an additional language have got slightly different needs, but that kind of like real focus on listening, that scaffolding and listening is really, really important. Hope that answers the question.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Christine. And I think actually we are sadly out of time, which is a shame because there were lots of great questions. So thank you to everybody for coming. We hope you enjoyed it, and apologies if we didn't get round to answering your question. Thank you also to Christine for making the time to be with us today. As we said earlier, we will be uploading a recording of this webinar, so you can revisit it and share it with your colleagues. So all that's left is to say thank you again. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care and keep well.